It's time for the Sports Blitz, the only live-streamed local sports show in Arkansas, with all the latest on the sports stories that matter to you.
Welcome into the Sports Blitz today on a Friday. I am your host, Weldon Braxton, joined by our producer, as always, Maddie Lassiter. Our good friend and co-host Mark Freeman is out of the office today. Maddie, Mark is on what he has titled a baby moon. Now, what is that? For those of you who don't know, Mark is expecting his first child here shortly. And so he and his wife, they're taking a little bit of time off. You know, she's a school teacher, so they're taking advantage of spring break. And I know this is a sports show, but this is a perfect opportunity to voice my issue. The issue I think I told you about it, Maddie. My spring break philosophy and what I have a problem with. I don't understand people who are not affiliated with the school system taking spring break. Now, I just told you Mark's wife's a teacher. They're expecting a child. Totally different case. But you all know, look, I'm 25. I graduated years ago from college. I'm done with spring break. Why do I need to go on spring break? I'm in the working world, and I'm not in the school system. Therefore, I have no need or reason to take spring break. Oh, you work at Kmart. No, let me just randomly take spring break, even though we don't have or a need for spring break. I don't get it. And it's not even so much about recharging your batteries this time of year, because I'm even okay with that. But you have people who are in their mid-20s doing the whole, the beach and the parties and all the unmentionable stuff you do on the beach during spring break. There's people in their mid-20s doing that who aren't even in school. Just assess yourself. That's my only advice. I'll get off that. That's my spring break philosophy. But I'm not only here to educate you on the different parts of life, but we have sports to talk about today. The Sweet 16 got underway last night. We saw some pretty good matchups, but Mark and I, we talked about this on Wednesday. Tonight's the night where we expect a lot of the big-time teams to play big-time matchups. You look over in the East, you have Virginia and Michigan State. Much anticipated matchup, and we'll get into that. In the bottom part of that bracket, somewhat surprised the UConn Huskies have made it to the Sweet 16. Not a huge surprise, but they'll be playing Iowa State, one of the better offensive teams in all of college basketball. And then on the other side, in the Midwest, the Bluegrass matchup, Kentucky-Louisville Part 2. Louisville went to Rupp Arena and got beat by Kentucky earlier this year, but Louisville's a different team, and so is Kentucky. And that'll be a fun matchup to see as the defending champions take on the Young Bucks from Lexington. And then in the bottom half, the Michigan Wolverines, one of the best offensive teams in the NCAA tournament. We know about Nick Stauskas, but they have a whole lot of other weapons on that team against the big, bruising, physical Tennessee Volunteers. So some great matchups tonight. But let's look back at last night. Last night you saw the Florida Gators, the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament, taking on a very talented UCLA team. And I think when most people filled out their brackets, they had Florida advancing to the Final Four, getting through the first weekend, getting through this weekend onto the Final Four. But I felt like once we got here that there were some people kind of feeling UCLA a little bit. You look at Kyle Anderson, a 6'9" ball handler type versatile player who will be a lottery pick in all likelihood. Jordan Adams, one of the better scorers in all of college basketball. Zach LaVine, the young guard for UCLA, he's being compared to a young Russell Westbrook in terms of his explosiveness and athleticism at the guard position. And so some people were saying, well, UCLA's got the talent. Can Florida match up? But I think you saw the veteran leadership of Florida take over. I thought Steve Alford made a critical mistake by taking Kyle Anderson out when he did and leaving him out for the time that he did. UCLA was right in that game until their point guard / playmaker Kyle Anderson was taken out, and that's when Florida really stretched it out. And I was on Twitter last night, as I usually am. I'm usually tweeting about the games, and Kyle Anderson's a guy who he came up in my mind, and look, he's a really good player. He does a lot of things for UCLA. He is their point forward. He's essentially a 6'9" point guard, an intriguing skill set. But I made the point of are you really sure about Kyle Anderson? Is he really this knockout, can't-miss prospect? Because to me, here's what he is. He's a tall guy who can dribble better than most tall guys, but not as well as a guard. So I know that's intriguing to hear, but realistically, what is that skill set? Okay, he's tall. He dribbles better than most tall people, but you want to put him at a guard where he dribbles worse than most guards. He's not a great shooter, so I think people are getting mesmerized with Kyle Anderson's skill set. I think he's a nice player. I think he's got some feel and some touch, but I'm not as sold on Anderson as a lot of people are. I think if he's not careful, he'll turn into Lamar Odom, because Lamar Odom was always a guy who you would look and say, well, he's tall, he can shoot, he can dribble, but realistically, what was Lamar Odom ever great at? Lamar Odom was a guy who always left you saying, man, if he ever just did this, if he could just do that, he could be so great. But he always left you wanting more. I think if Kyle Anderson's not careful, he'll be that same way. But if he zeroes in on a certain set of skills, I think he can be really good. So that was the Florida-UCLA matchup. The Gators ended up winning it with their run. And tomorrow they will take on the Dayton Flyers, who won what might be the worst Sweet 16 matchup any of us have ever seen. I mean, really, who all had Stanford and Dayton in their Sweet 16? I know I certainly didn't. I don't think many people did either. Look, Stanford and Dayton got there because they upset teams that, quite frankly, were overrated. You know, Dayton got there because they beat an overrated Ohio State team, and they beat a Syracuse team who struggles on offense from time to time. You look at Stanford. Stanford is not a very good team. I mean, if you told me Arkansas would beat Stanford in a 7-game series, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Stanford, they have some size. They have no point guard. They're not all that athletic. But you know what? They beat a Kansas team who, in my opinion, was always overrated, and they didn't have Joel Embiid. And so you put those two teams together, Stanford and Dayton, you get the most overrated or the worst Sweet 16 matchup I think I've ever seen in my lifetime. And the sacrificial lamb, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, the Dayton Flyers will lose to the Florida Gators. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You know, Archie Miller's done a really good job with his Dayton Flyers. He got a new contract extension. Can't get mad at him, but I don't think Dayton's that good. I think Florida gets to the Final Four, which is something they've came just short of the last few years. And so last night we also had the West. The West, you know, when the brackets came out, the West for me was strange because I thought it had the potential for a lot of chaos. And, you know, you saw an upset. You know, Oklahoma did lose to North Dakota State in the round of 64, but it really wasn't as chaotic as a lot of us thought. It reduced down to a 1-2, Arizona versus Wisconsin, Elite Eight, which is what a lot of people had in their bracket. You look at how these teams got there. Arizona essentially had a cakewalk, in my opinion. You beat Weber State, a 16 seed, and then you come back and you have a somewhat easy game in the next round. Then you come up here and you get a San Diego State team who they're really good defensively, not much offense. San Diego State's defense kept them in the game, but a little bit of a spurt led by Nick Johnson and company helped Arizona separate. They're going to take on a Wisconsin team who they beat Baylor down. And I got to say, this was a game that I saw coming a mile away. Baylor, they're a team with athletes, and they were a hot shooting team. That's what got them to the Sweet 16. But ultimately, I didn't think at their core they were a really good basketball team. And if they didn't hit shots the way they did against Creighton, Wisconsin would slice them up. And that's exactly what you saw. Baylor played that zone. They frustrated Creighton. I didn't think Greg McDermott, the head coach of the Creighton Blue Jays, father of Greg McDermott, to be honest, I didn't think he did a great job attacking that Baylor zone. In this round last night, Bo Ryan is now attacking that zone. He knows exactly what to do, and you saw the Badgers carve up Baylor. It should be an interesting Elite Eight matchup tomorrow between Wisconsin and Arizona because, sort of like Virginia, Wisconsin plays that pack line defense. And so if you're Arizona, you're going to have to make shots, which is something they haven't always done, and that'll be a fun matchup as well. We'll hit some more tournament talk, but I just want to give you a little preview on what we saw last night. We got so much going on today, unionizing in college athletics, gaining more momentum. The Northwestern players, if you've been following this story, they have filed to be viewed as employees. They want to be a labor union, and this just opens up Pandora's box. It's one of those things where we could sit up here, a lot of people on a radio show or whatever, and give you a quarter of the facts or give you some of the facts, but it's really a complicated issue with a lot of things going on. So I'll just give you my overarching opinion of it. And I think that the players should be careful. I think the athletes need to be careful and make sure they really understand what unionizing can do, because if you hear a lot of experts, now you're talking about taxes coming into play. You now may be having to pay money as an athlete, because if you're an employee, obviously that brings you a whole lot of factors, government, taxes, things you have to pay, things that you're responsible for. So, my overarching belief in it is that players or athletes need to be careful when they're viewing this unionizing situation, because it may bring on more than what they're willing to chew. And so, but really, this is all a small piece of the puzzle, because I believe it's really speaking to the fact that college athletics, it's time for a new subdivision. Right now in Division I athletics, you have FBS and FCS schools. If you want some examples, University of Arkansas is an FBS, or Razorbacks, an FBS school. Bigger schools. Arkansas State's, even though they're in a smaller conference, they're still considered an FBS. FCS schools used to be what you would call a 1AA. That's what, like a UCA. That's kind of what they're in. They're an FCS school. And so I think that the interest of UCA and the interest of the University of Florida, you can't tell me that those interests are parallel and they're fully aligned. I'm sorry, but there are some things that UCA can and can't do, and there are some things that Florida can do and they want to do, and those interests just don't parallel with one another. And so I think ultimately this speaks to the fact that it's time for an additional subdivision. Let the big power schools, and the University of Arkansas is included in that, let them do their own thing to where they want to pay guys, they want to give stipends. If they want to be more of a commercialized professional entity, let them do that. Let the FCS schools stay on the scholarship, student athlete driven mentality, and I think it would all work out. So again, I'm not gonna hit too many details with that or bash it too hard, because there's so much going on. And I think when you hear this issue, you're gonna have a lot of people say things that they have no idea what they're talking about whatsoever. And I don't want to be one of those people. So moving on, Pro Day. Johnny Manziel, Texas A&M star quarterback, had his pro day. Now, the A&M pro day was earlier this month, but Manziel was still working on some mechanical things. He did throw for scouts and GMs yesterday. I got to watch it on ESPN. Sensational job. Now, you have to keep pro day in perspective. You have to keep in perspective, that the guy's running around in shorts, and he did wear helmets and shoulder pads, which is something unusual for a quarterback or anybody in a pro day, but he showed he can make all the throws. I don't think there was any question when you left that workout that Johnny Manziel had the throws in his arsenal. The deep ball was on point. The intermediate routes were on point. He didn't throw a lot of vertical boundary type throws, deep outs, deep comebacks, and that's something that people will question him on. But I thought Johnny Manziel helped silence some critics, although the verdict is still out on what Johnny football can do. There's just so much going on today. I mean, the NBA, you got the Heat and the Pacers. We're going to take a look at that. The NFL free agency is winding down just a little bit. Jared Allen signed with the Bears the other day. We went over that a little bit. How about Miguel Cabrera? He got paid. Detroit Tigers first baseman. He got paid 10 years. Now, there's been some different reports on the numbers, but essentially 10 years, $300 million. Some reports say 292, but you know what? Yeah, you just round it up. I mean, if you have 292, I'm pretty sure you're okay. You're like, man, I really wanted to buy something, but I need 300 million to do it, and I only have 292. Darn. guess I can't do all the things I wanted to do. So, we're going to take a look at that. Arkansas Razorbacks, we closed up shop on the basketball season. We may take a look back at that, depending on what we have time for. There's so much going on today's show. My spring break rant kind of took some time, but we may hit that. The baseball team, they're in action, had a good midweek series. They are about to embark on a very tough stretch. We're going to look at their schedule and all the things they have going on. We're going to see if this team can really compete or if they're going to be in the SEC cellar. So don't go away.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. We've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
here's what you missed.
Updated news.
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
Developing stories.
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
And weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on. KARK4 today.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out RiverValleyLeader.com.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
Welcome back into the Sports Blitz today. Thank you for joining us as always. And I was all prepared to move on, and I was going to talk some NBA, but our producer Maddie in the break, he got me started again on this Miguel Cabrera contract. I was just going to let it go. I announced it, and I was just going to let it go and get on to other things, but he brought up the fact that it just doesn't make sense. Miguel Cabrera, he was a young player when he got to be a star, but he's been around a while, and you give him a 10-year deal. Now, I guess technically it's 8, but if it doesn't start for 2 years, essentially you're committed to Miguel Cabrera for 10 years. I don't understand giving an athlete a 10-year deal. Like, I can't think of an athlete right now who I would give a 10-year contract to. I mean, I'm dead serious. You look at the top athletes in any sport. I don't care if it's Andrew Luck or any other young player, if it's Kevin Durant, LeBron James. They're all too old. I mean, Andrew Luck's, 23 now, roughly 23, 24 years old. That's too old. You can say a quarterback, more likely he'll be durable through that, maybe. But LeBron James is the best athlete right now in all of sports. And there's no way I would give him a 10-year deal. You can't give him a 10-year deal in basketball. But even if you could, I wouldn't do it. Miguel Cabrera right now, and I believe he's in his early 30s. I'm going to look it up. But do you realize how long he's going to be productive with that 10-year contract? I mean, I would think after A-Rod, Miguel Cabrera's 30, he'll be 31 in April. But I would think after the A-Rod situation with the Yankees, teams would steer away from giving athletes and baseball players 10-year deals. I mean, forget about the back end. I know we're going to talk about, in the last 2 years, it doesn't mean a whole lot. You're paying for the first 6-7 years. I'm not sure if Miguel Cabrera is going to be worth this in 5 years of the deal when he's age 35 going on 36. You know, the St. Louis Cardinals caught a lot of flack for not going 10 years with Albert Pujols. They're like, oh, we're St. Louis. We have a small town feel, and they need to keep Albert. He's the face of the team, the superstar, and he's brought notoriety to St. Louis. And St. Louis essentially told Albert, look, here's our number. Here's how many years we're at. You can take it or leave it. And Albert, it was his prerogative. He left it. He went to the Angels. They gave him the more robust contract. And now look where the Angels are at. They are several million in the hole. Albert's not living up to that contract whatsoever. And that contract hasn't even gone deep yet. It's early in that deal, and it's already looking bad. And they're going to have to keep paying that deal for the remaining years. I can't see giving an athlete a 10-year deal. If you think so, please give us a call. If you can think of an athlete right now who you feel is worth a 10-year contract, let me know. Call us at 968 News. I would love to hear it. Speaking of your opinion, our CrossFit Russellville poll question has to do with the NCAA tournament. And as you heard earlier, I broke down the games and what happened and what I expect to happen coming up over the weekend. And our CrossFit Russellville poll question is simple. I want to know which remaining NCAA tournament coach you trust to win a game. You do have a lot of choices. You have Billy Donovan, two-time national champion. You've got Tom Izzo, who's been to multiple Final Fours, multiple Elite Eights, including a national championship to his credit. How about Rick Pitino, another Hall of Famer, one of the greatest to ever do it. John Calipari, who's known for his recruiting, and he's been to Final Fours. Even if most of them have been taken away, he still has been to some Final Fours. And so, even maybe a dark horse coach like a Bo Ryan, I feel like Bo Ryan gets taken for granted. He has Wisconsin in the mix, competitive, consistent year after year, although we don't look at him the way we look at some of those other coaches. And then, maybe it's a wild card. Maybe you think Sean Miller. Sean Miller, Arizona, had success at Xavier. Always a good defensive coach. He's got Arizona looking primed to make a Final Four run. Or his brother. How about the Miller brothers? In the Elite Eight, Archie Miller taking Xavier. So I want to know. That's our CrossFit Russellville poll question. We will revisit it, and I will give you my answer. Maybe a surprise to some people. There's some popular names, and then there are some names that are more dark horse candidates, and I may go with a dark horse, but well, we were on the air on Wednesday. We talked about the upcoming matchup at the time between the Miami Heat and the Indiana Pacers. It was the third game of their 4-game set this season. They split the earlier matchups 1 game apiece. And the third meeting took place a couple of nights ago in Indianapolis. And the Pacers won a close one. It was physical. It was rough. It was low scoring. It was everything that Indiana wanted it to be. And ultimately, they won the game. So now you ask, well, what does this have to do with the postseason, and is this going to have any effect on the Pacers or the Heat? And I say no. I think this game to me meant more to the Pacers. I get that Miami wanted home court, or they do want home court, and that matters to them. I'm not saying Miami didn't try to win the game. I absolutely believe that Miami went in there and they tried to win the game. But I feel like Indiana needed the game more, because although Miami would love to have Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals at home, I firmly believe that they cannot, or at least they don't feel confidence in going to Miami. I don't think Indiana feels like they can go to Miami and win. Now, they may talk a big game and say, well, yeah, we can win Game 7 at Miami, but you heard whispers when they lost Game 7 last year to the Heat, and they said, well, if that had been at our field house, we would have won that game. I feel like Miami can go up to Indiana and win a Game 7, and they feel confident about it. So in the end, I think that game meant more to the Indiana Pacers. I think they feel like they had to have that. And they are in the driver's seat now, because the best Miami can do is tie the season series, and then some other tiebreaker scenarios breaking their way. So more than likely, they will be the number 1 seed, and It could make a difference. I just don't think it will. I think if Miami is healthy and they're right, I say they can go and win a Game 7 in Indianapolis. And, you look at the Eastern Conference right now and the dynamics going on, and we've talked about it being primarily a two-horse race, Indiana, Miami, and I'm not deviating from that whatsoever. I still feel like it'll come down to those two, but you got to look at some teams playing well now. Chicago's playing better, although even with Derrick Rose, I never believed their offense was enough. And the Brooklyn Nets. I would say this, and this is not going to be popular. I know our good friend Mark will disagree with me, but Mark's not here. I think the Brooklyn Nets pose, at the very least, just as much of a threat as Indiana. And here's why. The Brooklyn Nets, whether it's scoring or not, they are led by Paul Pierce. That's Paul Pierce's team. Now, he may not be the leading scorer or doing all these things, but Paul Pierce, from a leadership role, he owns that team. Jason Kidd can sit down. This is Paul Pierce's team. And what I've seen from them lately is he has sort of injected a little bit of that Boston Celtic nature into this team, along with Kevin Garnett. And yes, they're old, and yes, they can't get it done like they used to, but from a Miami Heat standpoint, the Celtics always had a little something that concerned you. Even the last year that Ray Allen was in Boston before he went to Miami, the Celtics took Miami to 7 games. Celtics actually led the series 3-2, going back home to Boston to close out Miami in 6 games. And LeBron James had 45 points, a sensational game. But the Celtics have always had this, even when they're old and not that good, sort of, I don't want to say a kryptonite because they didn't beat Miami, but they've always been a thorn in the side of the Heat because of their old man tricks, their old man ways, how they get in people's head, how they may do some underhanded type things. And when you look at Brooklyn and Miami and the games they've played this year, you've seen Paul Pierce sort of have those moments where he tries to get in LeBron James's head or when he tries his little old man tricks like he did in Boston. And they've worked. They've had success against Miami this year. Now, I don't think they can beat them in a 7-game series, but I don't believe Indiana can beat Miami in a 7-game series either when healthy. I think the Brooklyn Nets have converted into a Boston Celtic-like team with some veteran, old man type mannerisms and actions to them to where they're a dangerous team. Because they do have scorers like Darren Williams, like Joe Johnson. I love that they have Sean Livingston now who can move Darren Williams off the ball some when Darren wants to concentrate on scoring. Brooklyn's an interesting team to me. I didn't believe in them to start the year. I didn't think all of this would come together. To a point it has, but right now, I would say watch out for the Brooklyn Nets. I know all this focus is on Indiana right now. Brooklyn will not be an easy out because I think those veterans mixed with some of those younger scorers have really got something going on there. And then out in the Western Conference, it's just a dogfight. San Antonio, they're quietly going on a long winning streak as they typically do. The Clippers are still in the mix, although Chris Paul didn't play well the other night. But you still have Houston, who they're scoring about 130 a game, and they're giving up about 129 a game. But you know what? As long as you're winning, I guess that's okay. And then the Oklahoma City Thunder, Russell Westbrook had a little bit of a scare a few days ago, but it seems like he's got his health back in order. So that's a look at the NBA. Again, hard to get into it. I know people are saying, well, I can't get into the NBA right now. It's too early. Call me when we get to at least the second round and maybe even the conference finals before I get excited. But, speaking of the NBA, we've got some kids who may be entering the league. Andrew Wiggins, the Kansas Jayhawks star, has already said he's gone. That's right. Matty's playing our NBA music now. I was wondering where it was at. Our NBC NBA, was it Round Ball Rock? Yeah, Round Ball Rock. Basketball, yeah. You got to watch the SNL skit to understand that. But Andrew Wiggins is gone. Wiggins is a guy. It doesn't surprise me. He's been one and done. I'm out of here. Ever since he was a junior, really, in high school, you kind of knew he wasn't staying. Parker, you figure he's leaving too, but you got a sense that there was a little bit more of a chance he will stick around. Joel Embiid, who really wasn't on the radar as a lottery pick to start the year, at one point was the consensus number one pick, but now he's got back issues and certainly, big men and lingering issues. That always scares some teams. So we'll see if he comes out. But Danny Ainge, the GM for the Boston Celtics, essentially came out and said that he doesn't see a franchise-changing player in this draft. And I think that kind of took some people back because they were like, well, this is supposed to be one of the best drafts we've seen in years. Wiggins, Parker, Embiid, Julius Randle, Marcus Smart, who stayed for an additional year, even a Gary Harris at Michigan State. I mean, just a lot of good players. And I think Danny Ainge, in a way, he's right. Because I can't speak to what these players will be 2 or 3 years from now. But right now, I don't see a player who is ready to come in and change life as a rookie. And you may say that, those standards are high. I can tell you right now, when Derrick Rose was at Memphis, I saw a guy that could change life in the NBA right that minute. Like, there's a few guys you watch in college and you say, this guy shouldn't even be here. He should already be in the league. That's how athletically dominant he is over the competition. And Derrick Rose is the only player, since there's been one and done college athletics, who I've said, that guy should be on a pro floor because he is so superior in terms of his athleticism. The rest of them, from a stock value standpoint, sure, they can be a top pick, and if that's what it's about, that's fine. But if you're trying to tell me their game is ready, or if you're trying to tell me that college basketball is beneath them because they dominated it so much, you need to get real. If LeBron James played college basketball for 1 year, he would have averaged at least 30 a game. His team would have won the national championship, no question about it. Can you say that even at all about any of these freshmen this year? Andrew Wiggins may be Mr. All That. Too many single-digit games of disappearance. He has not dominated college basketball. So if you want to say, well, his stock is high, he should go, then fine. I agree with you. But if you're trying to tell me that, his game is ready and he's just bored with college basketball because he dominates it so much, you need to get off the drugs because you're not watching the same Andrew Wiggins that I'm watching. Jabari Parker, he could also use some more seasoning. Julius Randle, all these kids could use some more seasoning. But in the end, I don't blame them because, yes, their stock is high. They're all projected top 5 picks. So I say go make your money. You're going to have a tough time. You have to develop while playing in the league. But some people may say, you know what? If I got to develop, I might as well be making some money while I'm doing it. I can't get mad at that. But don't try to tell me that their game is ready because it's not. It's just not whatsoever. So our CrossFit Russellville poll question, I want to hit it just before we go to our break here. Who is the coach you would choose to win one game? You got one game. Of all the coaches left in the NCAA tournament, I listed a lot of them: Billy Donovan, Rick Pitino, Bo Ryan, John Calipari, Tom Izzo, any of the other coaches. Who would you choose to win one game? I could give it away now, but you know what? I'm going to wait till we come back from our break. We're going to hit that. I'm going to give you my answer to the poll question. We're going to talk a little bit of Razorback baseball when we come back. That and much more. Do not go away.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. We've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
Here's what you missed.
updated news,
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
developing stories,
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
and weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance of rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on KRK4 today.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley. offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out rivervalleyleader.com.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
Bringing it home here on the Sports Blitz, Maddie and I talking about labor and the labor process. If you want to join in on that conversation, you can call 968 News. I just brought up the point: is it ever 9 months? Is the child ever born exactly at 9 months? It's usually a shorter time. That's all I was saying. I don't know who came up with 9 months, but I think we need to recalculate that to like 8.2 or 8.4 months, just to be more accurate. But finishing it up here on the Sports Blitz today, a really interesting story. There is some puppy love going on the Iowa State campus. Here's a story that comes out. Fred Hoiberg, who's in New York, coaching his team in the Sweet 16, his daughter was asked to the prom by none other than the son of Iowa State head football coach Paul Rhodes. I heard he made a video and did like some other stuff. I haven't checked that out yet, but they asked Fred about it. Like, Fred, Paul Rhodes' son is asking your daughter to the prom. What do you think? And, you know, he gives a typical dad response of, I haven't seen it, but I'll check it out, and he better keep his hands off. You got to give the canned, tough dad response. Although we all know the mayor's a cool guy. I don't know how tough he can really be, but puppy love on the Iowa State campus. I'm sure Paul Rhodes wishes he could win as much as Fred Hoiberg, but that's a whole nother story. CrossFit Russellville poll question. I've teased it long enough. The coach that I would take to win a game in the NCAA tournament it's a tough one. I'm going to go with Rick Pitino. Rick Pitino is my guy. I'm taking him over Tom Izzo. I'm taking him over Billy Donovan, Bo Ryan. I think when you look at Rick Pitino, first of all, his style of play. And I said on this show, and I talked to Mark about this, and I noted that style of play in basketball is overrated in terms of what makes a good team and what makes a bad team. Now, personally, I enjoy full court pressure, up-tempo basketball. That is my preferred style of play to watch and coach when I do, youth league coaching. But that is not the only way to succeed. There are a lot of really bad teams that try to press. There are a lot of really bad teams that try to play slow and half-court basketball. And so you really can't get too caught up in the style. It's more about talent, fundamentals, and execution, no matter what system you're running. But I think with Coach Pitino, when you're facing that style of play in a tournament setting where normally you don't have a lot of time to prepare for, it's a quick turnaround, so to speak, and especially if you don't play against it a lot in, say, in your conference or any of your other opponents, it can overwhelm you. Even Florida's press last night against UCLA, it wasn't a hot press. It wasn't a press that really turns you over a whole lot, although it can. It's just about grinding you. And you saw UCLA, who not a lot of teams in the Pac-12 press. And so the press really bothered UCLA. I think Rick Pitino, he's won championships. He's been to Final Fours. He's coached in the NBA. He's obviously had success in college. I'm rolling with Rick Pitino to win me a game. I think he's a guy I trust. He's big time. He's done in the big moments. And that's not a slight. Billy Donovan, two-time national champion, can't knock him. Tom Izzo's been the model of consistency at Michigan State, but I'm going with Rick Pitino as my coach. our CrossFit Russellville poll question, see who weighed in on it. We had somebody say Michigan State and Tom Izzo. Can't argue with it. Not my choice, but I can't argue with it. Again, pressure defense is tough. It's tough to go against when you're not used to it. I want to quote Clark Kellogg from last night and what he said. Because he had like a bunch of stuff that rhymed. You know how Clark Kellogg is. He's talking about the Florida press, and he was saying the Florida press isn't designed to flip you and rip you. It's to grind you and wind you. Yeah, that's what he said. He had like 6 rhymes in a row. And you know that he's on there with Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith, and Kenny Smith, you know, he's making fun of him, saying, "Yeah, well, that's good analysis, Clark, and I don't know about things that rhyme. I don't know how you wind or grind people, but I'll tell you how to win the game." So you know, Kenny and Charles, you can't beat them. TNT college basketball, I'd watch them do anything. I watch them do any type of sports. Although I'll say this, I'm not sure I like the mix of Kenny and Charles with Clark Kellogg. I mean, I like all 3 of them, but I feel like Clark Kellogg is a little bit too maybe stiff. Maybe that may be the word. I feel like Kenny and Charles they're gonna have some fun on the set. And so if you're not with that, you know, it's gonna be kind of awkward. I kind of wish they had rearranged things a little bit. You know, they put Greg Gumbel with Kenny and Charles. I think you got to leave Ernie Johnson. You got to leave Ernie Johnson. You got to let that whole TNT dynamic manifest itself. And then you throw another college basketball expert with it, or aficionado. I'll use Stephen A's word. You need another college basketball aficionado because, yeah, Kenny and Charles are NBA guys. Ernie's an NBA host. So you throw in another guy. You look on the other channel, and that's right, we're breaking down the analyst here, CBS analyst. The other channel, I kind of like their vibe a little bit because they're not as polished. Grant Hill, Steve Smith. I mean, they're not that great. I mean, let's just be honest, they're not that great. But, you know, Doug Gottlieb, Seth Davis, I think that's a good dynamic just because Doug Gottlieb likes to make fun of Seth Davis and how little he knows about X's and O's of basketball. You know how Gottlieb is. He'll make sure that he lets you know that he knows something about basketball. But, you know, Grant Hill, he just retired from the NBA. He's doing a pretty good job. You know, there's always these analysts who they're not bad, but they're not good either. And there's a few of them are terrible. I'm sorry. When Scottie Pippen was an analyst, no, I couldn't. I wasn't feeling Scottie Pippen. But Grant Hill's one of those guys, and I guess he's still new to it. He's not terrible where you turn him off and you're like, man, I can't listen to him. But he's also not one of those guys where you're like, I got to hear the next word he says. You're not hanging on to his next word. So maybe he'll get better. That's my breakdown of the CBS analyst. I know you want my opinion of that. And, you know, one thing that we have not talked about, speaking of the broadcasting world, the shakeups with ESPN. You know, Brett Musburger has now joined the SEC network. He and Jesse Palmer will be doing the main event game each week for the SEC network. It appears as though Chris Fowler will be doing the primetime Saturday night ABC game. So a little bit of a shakeup, and it kind of got me to thinking about, you know, who is your dream combination? Like, you got a big game. Let's just keep it in college for right now. You got a big game, and you're thinking about who would I want to call my game. You know, first of all, who's my play-by-play? Do I want Musburger? Do I want Vern Lundquist? Or do I want Beth Mowins? You know, I don't think Beth is going to get a lot of votes. You know, Beth Mowins and Pam Ward. They seems like they always do that like 11 o'clock in the morning Big Ten game that nobody cares about. Seems like they put her and put Beth and Pam on those games. But you know, who would you take? You know, would you take Joe Tessitore? I think Joe Tessitore's got one of the best voices in the business. And then you obviously got to have a color commentator. You go in Herb Street. You go in Gary Danielson. You know, you go in Rod Gilmore. I'm not going Rod Gilmore or Matt Millen. Those two, no, I can't roll with them. I'll go with Herb Street. You know, people sort of underrate Gary Danielson, in my opinion. I feel like they get bored with him or they like to knock him. I'm cool with Gary Danielson. I think he knows the game. I think he's insightful. Plus, with Vern and Gary, it's like they're synonymous with SEC football. And obviously we're here in SEC country, so when you think about big moments for Alabama and Auburn and LSU and Arkansas and Florida, a lot of the big moments you've seen among those teams over the years, those two have called those games. And so I think that kind of carries a little bit of weight with me too as far as my broadcasters. So, but if you have your dream combination of guys who you think would be your dream combination to call a game, let us know at 968 News. What else is going on? Shaka Smart. Maddie and I were talking about this before the show today. Why is Shaka Smart still the head coach of VCU? Here's a guy who he took VCU to the Final Four in 2011. He beat Kansas. He lost to Butler in the Final Four. Obviously, Butler went to the Final Four or national championship game in back-to-back years. And I think it's about career preservation. As a coach myself in the college ranks, I keep up with this stuff, and it's something I really monitor. And I think you're seeing a departure in what's going to make a coach jump from one job to the next in terms of, well, there's a small job open or there's a power conference job open, and used to be a coach would just jump on it. You have a little success at a mid-major, you go take a bigger job, even if it's a mediocre big job. Like Stan Heath, you have a hot year at Kent State, you go take an Arkansas program over that's in shambles. And what happens, you don't really succeed, you get fired, and then you're forced to take another job that's even worse in Arkansas. You don't succeed there, and you get fired, as Stan Heath did from South Florida. And Stan's not the only one. There are a lot of coaches who they have a little bit of mid-major success. They rush and take that middle-of-the-road power conference job. They fail until they're forced to either go back to being an assistant or taking an even worse power conference job, and it's not good for their career preservation. And so I think what you're seeing with Chris Peterson, who held out at Boise State, Chris Peterson didn't want to go to Alabama. Yeah, Alabama's a big job, but it's tough to win. A lot of expectations, a lot of pressure. He didn't want that. He had opportunity for Florida when USC was open before they hired Lane Kiffin. He just turned these jobs down because it wasn't the right fit, and he wanted to make sure he had enough equity built up to where if he did fail, he could come back and get a job. He's like with Kevin Sumlin. A lot of rumors about Kevin Sumlin possibly taking an NFL job. He was rumored to take the Eagles job before Chip Kelly did. Going into last year when the Panthers looked to be struggling once again and Ron Rivera was thought to be on the way out, many people thought, well, Kevin Sumlin to Carolina. I was glad for Kevin Sumlin's sake that he didn't take an NFL job or he didn't take a bigger job, because I feel like Kevin Sumlin still needs to build up more equity on his resume to fall back on if needed. Because, this is what happened. This is how people are. Everybody's patting Kevin Sumlin on the back right now. Oh, he's done such a great job. He's a great coach. But that's because he's winning right now. If you go to another job in NFL or a bigger college and you lose and you flame out, don't just think that, I can fall back on the successes I've had, because it doesn't work that way. What will happen is people will then begin to question what you did at your previous jobs. They'll say, he did win at Houston, but Art Briles kind of helped make the bed for him. He did inherit Johnny Manziel, one of the greatest players we've seen in college football. And now he's at his new job and he flamed out. Maybe he really wasn't that good after all. You know how I know this? Because I'm seeing it right now in the state of Arkansas. A guy by the name of Mike Anderson. You may have heard of him. Head basketball coach for the Hogs. Now, when Mike Anderson got the job 3 years ago, the talk was, he went to the Elite Eight. He competed with Kansas. He turned Missouri around. He turned UAB around. You heard Mike Anderson's resume being talked about like it was like John Wooden's resume, just like, it was talked up. But now Arkansas has gone 3 straight years, no NCAA tournament under Mike Anderson. Now you're hearing people undermine those same credentials that they were once elevating, such as, when he was at UAB, that conference was really weak. And other than Calipari's Memphis team, they didn't really play anybody back then. And when he went to the Sweet 16, he beat, some overrated teams. And that's how he got there. And Missouri, he was kind of up and down. You take that Elite Eight year away, and he really wasn't even that good. That's the narrative now. Now, we're talking about the same resume, but the narrative is completely different. And that's what happens when you go take a new job and you're not having immediate success, or you flame out. People begin to question your resume unless your resume is so stacked to where it can't be questioned, such as Brad Stevens. If Brad Stevens were to flame out with the Boston Celtics, he could go get an elite college job now. That's what happens when you go to back-to-back Final Fours. That's enough equity right there to where you can go back to college and you can still pick up where you left off with a bigger job than you had when you left to go to the Celtics. It's all about career preservation. And I think it's something that coaches are now cognizant of more than they once were. I got to tell you what, I got to be honest here as I take a pause here. Have you ever, and Matt, hosting a show by yourself is a challenge. I got to tell you, it's one thing to be in the studio by yourself and have, somebody on the phone. That's one thing. But when you're up here just going at it for an hour, it is a challenge. I'm not going to lie. I normally get through half my water bottle. When I'm on here with Mark, I downed my water bottle halfway through the show. And so now I am laboring to get there. Doing a show all by yourself is very difficult. Colin Cowherd, he does the herd by himself. He has like callers and guests, and he takes his little fancy breaks and all his little ESPN amenities he gets. But we don't do that here on the Sports Blitz. You host a show by yourself, you march it all the way through. But I can tell you, it is a challenge indeed. NFL, goalpost dunking, I want to hit that a little bit. They are outlawing it. I think it's funny, Tony Gonzalez retires and they outlaw goalpost dunking, something that he made famous. I don't think it's a big deal. I think the NFL, it's one of those things where I just don't care enough to really, I don't really care enough to have an opinion on it of, oh man, I hate this rule. Or, yes, good, get rid of it. I don't care. It's goalpost dunking. It's not a big deal. They did have an incident with the Falcons. Jimmy Graham dunked it, and they had to, get the level out, make sure it was still straight. But other than that, to me, it's about the NFL flexing its muscles. NFL wants to let you know they're in charge. They're the big timers. They're, the players don't run them. The league runs them. And so I think it's just an assertion of authority with the NFL. So we hadn't even had our hog talk, have we, Matty? We hadn't even had any hog talk or our last break. Did we run our last break? Or? I think we did. Well, you know what? We're just going to go through it. You know what? Our sponsors, they're good friends with us. We're good. We're good. Hog baseball got a win over Mississippi Valley State, the Fighting Jerry Rices, if you want to remember more about them. The Razorback baseball team, we look at them this year. Expectations are lower than they've been the last few years. You lose some guys off the pitching staff. You obviously have no more Ryan Stanek. Randall Fant moves on. Before that, you lose DJ Baxendale. And there are some young, unproven pitchers, guys like Jalen Beeks who are stepping up, Trey Killian, the young sophomore. And it appears, if you watch Razorback baseball right now, it appears the pitching is still in place. Now, it is somewhat unproven against elite competition, although they did pitch pretty well when they went out to the Cal Baseball Classic. Only lost 3-4 to Cal and then 1-2 in a second game against Cal. But for the most part, we haven't seen Arkansas pitching against elite teams. They did pitch well against Florida, but Florida's not the same Gator baseball team we've seen in years past. The offense is still, what's the word? The offense is still a problem for the Arkansas Razorbacks, to say the least. You play Mississippi Valley State on, Tuesday. You win 6-0. You mercy rule them the second game on Tuesday. Then you close the series out with a 3-0 win against them. But it's a tough stretch, as I mentioned earlier in the show, for the Hogs coming up. They've got starting tonight, series against Mississippi State, always perennial power, always a contender. So they go to Starkville for 3 Friday through Sunday. Then their midweek series is against Nebraska. Nebraska, obviously a Big Ten opponent, quality. It'll help the RPI. It'll help as far as the NCAA tournament standings, but not your typical midweek cupcake are the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And then you've got South Carolina for your SEC series following that. South Carolina, perennial power. And then you have UNLV, who's one of the better teams in the Mountain West. LSU, always a power. Stephen F. Austin, an NCAA tournament team from last year. Vanderbilt, a power. So Arkansas, really, the next 3 weeks or so, we're going to find out a lot about this Hog baseball team. We're going to find out, first of all, if his pitching is for real. I like what I've seen so far, but I want to see it hold up against the schedule. I don't expect for them to go undefeated, or going 500 would be an accomplishment through this stretch, to tell you the truth. And so, but we're going to find out. Offensively, are they the same old Razorbacks, or the guys like Eric Fisher, Benintendi up top, the young freshman top of the lineup? Can these guys get it together? Brian Anderson, returning all SEC player. Can Arkansas get the offense going? That will be the question. You'll have to stay tuned to find out. Checking out ESPN.com, just going through the headlines here. The Raiders are expected to sign Maurice Jones-Drew, MJD, longtime Jacksonville Jaguar, going to sign with the Raiders. Now, that may raise a few eyebrows and ears here in Arkansas. We know the Raiders re-signed former Hog legend Darren McFadden to a 1-year deal. They have MJD in the fold. They made a deal to get Matt Schaub. I think the Raiders can compete this year. Compete-ish this year. Not sure they're a playoff team. The AFC West is tough. Kansas City will be back. We know about the Denver Broncos, the class of the AFC, and then San Diego, a playoff team from last year. So it won't be easy for Oakland to compete, but they've brought in some pieces. Dennis Allen's a good young coach, so maybe the Raiders cannot be as embarrassing. I almost said the Lakers. You know why? Because the Lakers are also an embarrassment. So I get my embarrassing teams mixed up. More announcements. We just talked about Kyle Anderson, the top of the show, the UCLA versatile 6'9" guard. He is going to the NBA along with Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine's the guy who we talked about being compared to Russell Westbrook, young athletic guard. So UCLA Bruins losing Kyle Anderson, losing Zach LaVine. Not really a surprise. Both players projected to go in the lottery, so no big deal. Going down on ESPN, the Islanders owner is in talks to sell the team. That is our do not care headline of the day, because I don't think anybody cares about the Islanders around here. And we on the Sports Blitz, we cater to our clientele. Mark Sanchez with the Eagles. The Eagles, I'm sorry, you have Mark Sanchez. He's not even going to start, but I feel like just having him on your roster, it's almost like a black cat running around. It's like, oh, no, he's on our team. We're going to have misfortune this year, but Chip Kelly adding to his collection of Pac-12 quarterbacks. Remember, he drafted Matt Barkley, Nick Foles, who exploded last year on the scene, the projected starter. Now he has Mark Sanchez. So getting all his Pac-12 boys back together out west or in Philadelphia from the West Coast. Finally, Ray Rice. In his situation, we know about the assault with his girlfriend and the report of him striking her and those horrible things. We're gonna see the trial on that, and it's a bad deal for Ray. There's video out, there's witnesses, there's testimony. Not a good deal for Ray Rice. So the Baltimore Ravens really shouldn't plan on depending on Ray Rice, because he looks to be in quite a bit of trouble. As we close up shop here on the Sports Blitz, Maddie, did we hit everything? I think we were all over the place today in a good way, and I want to thank you at home for joining us on the ride today on the Sports Blitz. Continue to check out rivervalleyleader.com. Also, on our way out, I want to push the Brightest Stars Banquet, May 29th, acknowledging our local star athletes. They're nominated. Mark he's making the ballot out right now. So get your tickets to the Brightest Stars Banquet on May 29th. You will not want to miss the event. For our producer, Maddie Lassiter. I'm your host, Weldon Braxton. We may or may not see Mark Freeman next week. Tune in to find out. You have a great weekend.